Hey, good morning, group. So I will not be able to meet at our appointed time at 11 p.m. So what I did is I wanted to record myself so that you guys could still have an understanding of where I came from, my journey to come back to Christ, which is has changed my life radically, and how I came about meeting you guys. So I divided my poster into four groups actually. My time of apostasy, I know it's backwards. This is apostasy. This is Momentum Christian Church when I was attending. This is currently at the East Lake Leadership College, and my graduate experience at the moment, saying yes to SCU about a year and a half ago in 2019. I forgot. So in the beginning, I was formerly Catholic. My family was Catholic. My family has a Hispanic background. So we were Catholic. Then we somehow made the switch to Christianity when I was around 10 or 12. We decided to go to East Lake Church. Before that, my dad was in the military, so we did move around a lot. We were stationed in South Carolina, so that's where I spent my primary years from 3 years old upwards to fourth grade, so that's around 10. That's when I was a Catholic. We then came back to San Diego, and around the year 1999, 2000, I settled back in an old elementary school, Rice Elementary, for my fourth grade year. We were still attending Catholic church. So it wasn't around until my middle school years that I became Christian, and that's when we started attending Christian school. We decided to convert to Christianity. So in my time of Catholicism, there was the role of communion, the roles that you do play. I'm trying to keep this under 10 minutes, actually, 'cause I'm pressed for time a little bit. But Awanas was something that I was a part of. I didn't really stick, but I do remember it fondly. So that was my first sort of real introduction to the Bible. Let's learn about this. Let's read this apart from Sunday school. That was still part of my formative years. As I go along, my biggest blip was in 2006 when I failed to get into to SDSU. It's called a Compact for Success that school systems had here. So here in San Diego, what that meant was if you achieved a GPA of certain GPA, certain classes met, you could make it to SDSU for basically no tuition paid. It was paid for you. SDSU was inviting students in, and I didn't get that. I nearly didn't graduate high school. I had 2 C's and I think a D, and I still managed to pass. So it was really hard. When prior to that, my parents and my mother especially had high expectations for my academic career. That's when I began working at Chick-fil-A around 2007, 2008. So that was my first step into adulthood. My mom and dad didn't really speak to me in that way. They're still together, even though that they've had a undulating marriage. So sometimes they would threaten divorce, sometimes they would have conversations, and it was mostly about me and them. But I still see it as it's really a communication style and a lack of communication style. So I'm just going to try to breeze through this as quickly as I can. So my sister did attempt suicide. She's attempted several times. In fact, her recent time was about under 2 years ago as a mother this time. So she's been heavily affected by motherhood and heavily affected by just trauma at home, where she would, since love was not found at home, she would seek it through other people. And I don't want to go into detail on that, but she had began garnering a reputation about herself that was not a reputation that you would want to go, that anyone should wear. But she did attempt suicide on several occasions. I mentioned already my parents. At a certain point, I wanted to run away and did want to join the army. That was something that I'd signed up for. I'd gone through their qualifications, I'd taken their exams, and on the eve of going into was MEPS, I cowered it down. I didn't show up. I wanted to escape. That was my mindset at the time. I was still far away from God, and there was nothing really tying us to God at all. My dad would go, but and I would sparsely go, but church didn't come home with me. That's the thing. Church did not come home with me, and we did not act like church at home. And the best place for church to start is at home, because as long as they see, as my belief, and this is something I had to learn, and was taught that if church is mimicked out there and church is mimicked in here, there's always going to be a positive influence of church at home, and that's where it starts. So you can go to church, but if it doesn't come home with you, then it's worth nothing, because then you're not practicing literally what is being preached. There was then alcoholism. By this time, I was already 21. Trying to make my own adult decisions. Didn't reach out to anybody. Thought I knew what I was doing. I still kind of have those habits sometimes where I don't like reaching out for help. But alcoholism was a huge one that took about maybe 2 to 3, 4 years. And so this is all while still living at home, and no one really stepping in to say, hey, don't do this, stop this, not until it got too late. So, and this eventually did stop. It went away. So by 2016, I graduated high school. I'm holding this, and my arms are hurting. So by 2016, which is the last one here down here on this column, 2016, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in English after spending about 9 or 10 years not knowing in community college, and now still working, but not really working towards anything, just working. So there was no vision, no goal. I had no idea what to do. I think it was just something that people got, and that was it. Literally, it was something that people just get, adults, and you're like, okay, boom, check mark off the list. One of the positive influences in my life was Patrick Smith. He was a guy who I worked with. His son I knew when he started at 14, so he's now a young man going to Colorado State. He's going to a theology school, which is great and amazing. But he was someone who did impact my life, kind of still was there, still praying for me, and I owe him a lot. Through my apostasy, God had a purpose for my life, even though I turned away from him. And even though I claimed to have known him yet, I acted as though I didn't. During the same time when I'm still jobless, my first niece was born. Despite everything, my sister got married, and my first niece was born with just the idea that God still does miracles. God still does miracles, and because my sister was not supposed to have children. I made then the decision to start going back to church around 2017, 2016. This is my Momentum Christian Church era. I say yes. I have powerful friends in Will Sevidal, who I work with. God, then in my joblessness, he found me a job at Chick-fil-A, still with the company, but in Del Sur, which is north of where I live right now. So it's about 35, 40 minutes away. Now, this is where God really had his time with me, because this is where I said yes to God. I said, okay, yes to this opportunity, and God still had some things to deal with me. And so I believe God took me in a wilderness out there to really just say, all right, we're going to go this, but you're going to go in a place where you cannot be a part of till some things just change and die down. I met a beautiful young lady in the name of Kendall Jennings. She kind of supported me in this. Then there was... I became a kitchen director because I was the only experienced individual at the store. The store was new owner, new store, 5 months old into its life. There was no structure. There was no leadership infrastructure. There was no wisdom to be given and to be had. And here I am, a new Christian, basically trying to relearn everything that I wanted to forget from my old time. Working with my old store, which was at about 9 years. So if you imagine, I was working at Chick-fil-A 2007, and in 2017 I decided to rework for the company. That's about a good 10 years that I spent wanting to move on to something else, but didn't really know what. And then I get this call like, well, okay, I'm back in this again. So back in the saddle, as it was. Um, all this still, and I was made kitchen director, which was the hardest role I've ever had been because it really tested a lot of my own leadership. A concept I had not learned about and not known about until I had rededicated myself to Christ. I had not known about that. I had not known about systems. I knew about patterns or procedures, but not systems were basically the same thing. So this was all new to me. I was humbled. I wept. I cried. I've not worked harder in this last 2 years than I've had in any of my entire Chick-fil-A career. And that was one where God really put me through the ringer. He really had to bend me and break me. And he humbled me a lot to the point where I had to call on him. I was crying in tears, not knowing what it is to do to be a leader, and how to basically teach kids how to do this and how to be not only um, themselves, but how do you grow them as disciples, and still trying to disciple to young men and women who maybe don't even care about it yet, but they hopefully will, and it'll plant some seeds, and we'll see what God does. God grows it. So that's where I was. What I took away was God had to humble me before He could use me. That was it. It's like, okay, we're gonna do this journey. We're gonna humble you to no end. I made the personal choice in this era around 2018, 2019 to be baptized again. To make that decision personal. It was amazing. It was on the 10th anniversary of Momentum Christian Church, so I'll always remember that. I met amazing individuals, Pamela and Keith Gooseby, and the Navarros. They were two couples that I met who, man, really, the Pamela and Keith have been together for over 30 plus years. The Navarros, they've gone through several different relationships, and before they became married, and just they were so human. They were so like, you know what, we're not going to be able to figure this out, but we're going to try. And it was such a beautiful model of, you know what, it's okay, you're going to make mistakes. But if we allow God to work through us and in us, He can take those mistakes and turn them into something beautiful. So the Navarros have kind of a blended family, and Keith and Pamela, they're still together. So it's just different examples of what God uses based upon kind of like the decisions that we make. And it's just so amazing. It's just so beautiful to watch. Healthy relationships are possible with God in the middle. And when we allow God into this and we say, God, we can't do this by ourselves, that's when we start giving up that control. And it's just so amazing and beautiful. God plants a seed of passion for ministry and leadership. This will then take me to my East Lake Leadership College, which was offered. Now, if you know about anything about the extension sites that SCU offers, they do have them at different church plants across the United States. So I had already a bachelor's, and my thinking was, well, I'm just going to get another bachelor's, but this time in ministerial leadership, because these are two things that can be blended together that I'm practicing still while in Del Sur, and just wanted to accumulate more knowledge in. This is where one of the practicum sites that I had while under the second bachelor's was Imperial Beach Church. It was a relaunched church from a 10-year-old project that Eastlake as a whole, Eastlake Community Church Network was doing at the time. They were going to shut this down, but they decided to relaunch it. I was part of their relaunch team. I still am, and I'm still faithfully serving to them this day. But this has been my first adventure into ministry, really, and just what it does look like, what it does take, both compassionate-wise, emotionally-wise, and everything in between. I was made in charge of the check-in team, of the reception of the first impressions, and it was something new, something different. It was the reapplication of my customer service skills to be put to ministry use, which I didn't think had no value. And that's actually where God used it. God can use my customer service experience, and God can use anything. At the time, I met then Dr. Pavich, who was a guest instructor, who is now our current director at the extension at the Leadership College. She taught me that I could use my restaurant experience based upon this organization called Big Table, and God again can use something I thought was worthless. I really did think, I had no idea how my food service industry experience, because at this time I wanted to go to a different career, but I didn't know what it was. God can use anything. God can use anything. And this ministry helps individuals in the food service industry to better themselves and to support them in their needs. And it's just like they're kin to me. As being a food service worker now for still over 10 years, going on 12 or 13, not even knowing, but that's where God can use that. And it's been a blessing. And I volunteer with them, and they serve other people who are in food service in their donor dinners and in their reception. And if I could ever choose a great place to work, I'd love to work for them. Um, I'm going to go down quickly, and here I am now in my graduate degree program. So I was pushed to get to a master's. I was pushed to, because I already had a bachelor's. Great challenges over God's greatest blessing I found. Unfortunately, Kendall and I did kind of separate a little bit. I don't know, maybe because God has different destinies for us. It was really hard. There's a lot of not communication. I was very good at communicating. I was still trying to figure out myself emotionally. There was a lot of youthful desires that we had, and we did express them, which was hard at the time uh, to make the decision. And it was in the beginning of this year, actually in last year in December, so around Christmas time. On the 23rd is when I say, you know what, this is perhaps where we have to stop, because there's just a lot of weight that's happening in my life, and she had gone off to school, and her destiny's taking her somewhere different, and maybe it's just acknowledging and respecting that. And it took a lot of us out of us emotionally, and I think we are more at peace as a result of it, even though it's not the way it should have been. But there's always going to be that small piece where, loving one another as brothers and sisters in Christ is perhaps greater than loving one another, in a relationship. And so that's something God's teaching me something in there. I met a good friend in Will Stewart just recently this year. He was just a young man in Christ, and this year I become youth leader. So there is no other youth leader at the moment other than the people who I've learned from and who are still incorporated in church. So that's kind of been a really cool story for me. I'm thinking about now somehow marrying education and ministry together as an extension side director would be a great, awesome aspiration to be one day, if God would let me do that. But somehow right now, maybe being a youth pastor is perhaps the best route right now. That's why I definitely want to continue going to school in human services. It was initially to work for Big Table as in a nonprofit capacity, but now there's just sort of, there's this pull from this, there's this pull from education, there's a pull from ministry, and there's a pull from the nonprofit sector that somehow, if God can blend it all together, that'd be so great. But that's where I come from, and I hope you guys have a great day, great meeting. Thank you guys in advance for your patience and for your concerns. Thank you in advance for your grace in me not showing up. Have a great one. Bye.